One of the most pressing fears is that of drugs. There's an unprecedented epidemic of drug abuse that must be addressed. In 1989, America was reminded how important the war on drugs was. President George Bush addressed the country on a somber note.
This is the first time since taking the oath of office that I felt an issue was so important, so threatening, that it warranted talking directly with you, the American people. All of us agree that the gravest domestic threat facing our nation today is drugs. Drugs have strained our faith in our system of justice. Drugs are sapping our strength as a nation. This is crack cocaine, seized a few days ago by drug enforcement agents in a park just across the street from the White House.
That very dramatic illustration showed the unprecedented reach of drugs into American cities. Not even the Capitol was immune. This would have been a very persuasive argument for the war on drugs if it were actually true. After the speech was written, the DEA was sent to Lafayette Park to get crack cocaine to use as a prop. Unfortunately, they couldn't find a single drug dealer in the park. Since discovering drugs being sold in the ghetto wasn't nearly as dramatic, they called a drug dealer from another part of town and asked him to deliver it to the park by the White House. The dealer, who was only a few blocks away, responded by asking, "Where the fuck is the White House?" When a DEA agent explained that the White House was where the president lived, the dealer responded by saying, "Oh, you mean where Reagan lives?" This would have made a perfect illustration of the problem with our educational system, but that wasn't the topic on this particular night.
Scares about drug use cycle through American culture often periodically because they're great for politicians, they're great for the media. And the way it typically works is it will be a focus on a category of drugs that actually is far from the most prevalent danger.
There are regular drug wars, which are designed to frighten the population into terror of drugs. Those who are running the wars, the government, know perfectly well that of course there's a drug problem, but they know perfectly well that the way to deal with the drug problem, if you care about it, is prevention and treatment and education. But it's much more effective to stir up hysteria in the population.
And thus began the next greatest fear: drugs.
I'm still drinking.
That's a good feeling.
It's a false feeling.
You're looking at jail time anywhere from a year to 25 to 30.
When it comes to drugs, friendship stops.
It's a temptation. It's the forbidden fruit.
As so often happens with hyped-up fears, people become afraid of the wrong things. Parents search their kids for crack cocaine and heroin. But the real epidemic was happening under their noses and in their medicine cabinets. Abuse of prescription drugs flourished as the public was misdirected.
The most common drug use in the US by a long shot is prescription drug use, but we very seldom get national scares about that because who's going to benefit from it, right? Who's going to really promote it? And there are lots of people who would, and companies and so forth, who prefer not to focus on that. So you get some obscure, quote unquote, new drug that there's a scare about.
We were fighting a war on drugs and didn't have time to question who our enemy was. We weren't fighting the pharmaceutical companies. We were fighting the drug cartels, drug smugglers, and of course, the terrorists. In 2001, just a few months after September 11, George W. Bush addressed the country.
It's so important for Americans to know that the traffic in drugs finances the work of terror, sustaining terrorists. The terrorists use drug profits to fund their cells, to commit acts of murder. If you quit drugs, you join the fight against terror in America.
I helped murder families in Colombia.
It was just innocent fun.
I helped kidnap people's dads.
Hey, some harmless fun.
I helped kids learn how to kill.
I was just having some fun, you know.
I helped kill policemen.
I was just having fun.
I helped the bomber get a fake passport.
All the kids do it.
I helped kill a judge. I helped blow up buildings.
My life, my body.
It's not like I was hurting anybody else.
It's just that simple. Drugs support terrorism, and buying drugs supports terrorists. With this latest fear of terrorism, all of our fears could be tied together. Terrorists are criminals. They sell drugs to our children. And they're even immigrants. There's just one problem. It's not true. The argument was that since the Taliban supported itself in part by producing poppies that could be made into heroin, drugs supported terrorism. But very few people use heroin. The most commonly abused drugs in America were marijuana and prescription drugs. But once again, logic wouldn't stand in the way of a great speech and a new war. We were fighting a war on terrorism and didn't have time to question who our enemy really was. The war on drugs gave way to the war on terror.